Hey, what is up? Welcome to another live stream. This is AJ from Fire from Heaven. As some of you know, I'm doing fantasy metal, or like kind of fantasy themed metal. Um, I write my own books. And as it turns out, I got my own physical books now. So you can check it out at firefromheavenshop.com. But once in a while I do live streams where I read some of my book. So this is the Storming of Hell. I don't know if the camera is like, it looks like it's backwards on there, so you can't really read it. But yeah. So it's kind of like a Chronicles of Narnia meets like Lord of the Rings, sort of, and also some fairy tale little bit thrown in there. So yeah, but epic battle stuff. But it's the book that my Hellstormer album is based on that I'm writing right now and haven't released yet. I hope to have like a couple of books finished because this is going to be like a series of books. So yeah, but I actually have my own physical book I can read from now, and I've written some other books. I think I'm actually up to like 4 or 5 books now. But this is another one. It's called At the Mouth of the Great River. It's more of a fairy tale kind of thing. But I'll start doing a live stream reading that once we finish this one. So yeah. And then there's some other books. I think this is probably one of my longest ones. I'm working on getting some physical versions of my first few books, like the Evil Wolf Chronicles and the Discourse with the Dragon. That was my first one. But yeah, so check out the books at firefromheavenshop.com if you like reading epic fantasy stuff with some allegorical stuff thrown in there. So yeah. But welcome to the live stream. We're going to get to reading. Alright, I don't even remember where I left off. So, I'm just going to do... start at chapter 8. The City Forsaken. Alright, I'm kind of stuffy, so... I'm sorry if it sounds annoying. Alright. After a week-long march, across the great sand and the 7... I can't even read my book. After a week-long march across the great sand, the 7 finally made it to the first city to be liberated before they took the Devil's Fortress in the mountains beyond. This city was called the City Forsaken by the Thralls. In their great plan, they did not include how they would liberate this city. They did not have to go through it, but as before, when they found the cave and food, there was a storm brewing over it, but it did not look like the devil's conjuring. It was beginning to rain. And in this world, rain's a big deal, okay, because it hasn't rained for like centuries. And this made the demons vulnerable. The fresh rain was so pure and so in tune with the song of creation that it burned the demon's skin if they were touched by it, for the uncreated could not bear the works of true creation. This gave them an advantage. Hellstormer laughed heartily. See now, the one who goes before us has already delivered our enemies over to us. Yet we must still act and take that which is being given, lest the opportunity be missed and our enemies recover their strength. Yes, said Shadowless. Let us storm the city and set the captives free, so we may have help on our quest to storm hell. This is good practice for when I actually record the audiobook, so I'm not messing up. Yes, shouted the others. And like a great storm on the horizon, they appeared before the townsfolk upon the hill of the city. And they ushered forth, shouting as they charged, and to the monsters of the city they looked and sounded like a great army, for their fire was so bright, and their shouts so mighty, that all ran from them, so there was a great monster slaughter. Even the thralls were so inspired they took up what arms they could find and fought the demons as they ran towards their master's fortress. Many were inspired and many were awakened, as the 7 were, and now the 7 were many, but the others, being the followers, were not as great as the first. Some still doubted and were uncertain. There was one called Discorder, who was awakened, but he began to doubt. He sowed much discord among the brethren, implanting fear and hopelessness. "It is a fool's errand that the 7 ask us to go on, my brothers," he said. "They will be met with the devil himself and an army that has been building for centuries, not to mention many great generals and priests that lead the armies, and at the head the greatest of them all." Hellstormer replied, "You say a fool's errand, and perhaps I agree with you. There is much to be feared. Yes, there are many, many foes within the devil's mountain walls. And though you do not say it, I can perceive that you want to call me a coward, and that I will lead you all to ruin and run for the hills as you were destroyed. But you are wrong there, Discorder. I am afraid, yes, I am terrified even, but I am going nonetheless, for in the direction of my darkest fear is also my greatest hope. You may think to hold the city, but it is, as you said, a fool's errand, and if a fool's errand they are, then why not take the fight to them and use our wits against such a great enemy, for we cannot endure them. Their forces could come and never stop, though we hold the battle lines for a year. We have a strategy, and there is only one way we can defeat such an enemy. So those of you who would live in fear and despair, stay and embark on the same errand as we, only without the hope we have, or come with us to face the evil that will enslave your children another 500 years, or even to the end of the world if they can. Our ancestors failed us. They lost their fire and gave in to fear and despair, but I will not. None of their names are remembered, only those who stood valiantly against the enemy till they died. Very few were their number, even so the number you would send away, while you slink back to your fearful ways and invite the evil you fear to pursue you. For those who will come, gather your provision and arms. We leave at dawn tomorrow. Get what rest you can, and tarry not on whatever fate you may think is fixed against us, but take joy in the great victory here today, and the victories that will come if you endure and overcome the evil to its den, where it shall be like a snake in his hole, with nowhere left to go." The men were quiet after Hellstormer finished speaking, and so was Discorder, for a moment, at least, before he went back to his fear and despair. "There is no hope in these fools, nor in facing the enemy. I must join them and save the others that I can, at least." Discord Sower found 5 others to go with him. They were the Brotherhood of Cowards, and they left that night to the fortress of the enemy, and were never seen nor heard of again. That morning all the men were ready, and in total they were 77. It was a mighty army, though seemingly very few. Just one of the firefolk would likely take hundreds of monsters down with him if he were to fall in battle. They began to march towards the great mountain fortress of the devil, of which his outer gates were towering mountains, and the only way through was a small crevice in between the 2 highest mountains called Hell's Gate. Chapter 9. The Self-Scorners. This is a pretty short chapter. I kind of tried to break it up into short pieces, so it's a little bit easier to read. So I never liked books with super long chapters, just in case, like, it's just easier to like find a stop if it's shorter. So that's why I do that. So if you like longer chapters, sorry. As they walked, they encountered more thralls. A great host they were, and it seemed they wandered the land with no direction. As they wandered, they carried whips with metal tips, and they continually whipped their own back. "I've heard of these folk," said one of the men. "These are the Self-Scorners. They all carry that same name, I believe, and they were so they were so tormented and scorned by themselves that the demons released them to go free, but they chose to wander and continually torment themselves. The demons thought it entertaining, so that is why they released them. A dark and despairing folk. I wonder if Discord Sower and his group joined them." I've heard the tale, said Hellstormer. Before the many there was only one, whose name was Self-Scorner. He was the first, and others followed. What suffering he endured to come to such madness I cannot say. I only wish he'd stop dragging others with him. They scorn the very thing God created and loved. Self-Scorners, shouted Hellstormer, hear the horn of the fire folk. Come forth from your pitiful ways and join us to free this world. Then he sounded his horn triumphantly. Some turned away and ran towards them, very few, but it was a great victory to Hellstormer. Of the few that turned away, in their hearts the flame of the firefolk was kindled, and they were given new names and clad in shining armor like the rest. One was named Firefeeder. He was of the first to turn away, and he ran and embraced Hellstormer, thanking him for his love and pledging to him his loyalty. He said, Hellstormer, I also name you Fate-Breaker and Doom-Defier, for it was my fate to wander and die, yet you've broken that terrible fate this day, as well as many others who were doomed to wander and die by the Doomsayer. Nay, friend, give praise to the King of Kings who dwells in the storms above and even higher than they. He is Thornbearer. He is the one who broke my terrible fate first. When the Doomsayer spoke of me, he said I'd be the architect of the devil's kingdom, but I have been broken from this doom and called to leap into faith and become the Hellstormer, now the breaker of the devil's kingdom. As I am called Firefeeder, replied he, you feed my fire also. I will stand with you to storm hell and bring Eden to this wretched world, and perhaps the souls of my kin and heart, the self-scorners, will whip themselves no longer. Yes, said Hellstormer, you feed my fire as well with your encouraging words. As they walked, the two talked for long hours of their plan to storm hell, and Firefeeder gave Hellstormer many ideas and offered great insight, for he had wandered near that place for a long time. Let's see where we are. Oh yeah, we got plenty of time to read more. Chapter 10. Battle of Storms and Iron. They approached a large field, and on the other side was a small passage between the mountains, and there, lying in secret wait, was a great army posted along the cliffs, many archers with poisonous arrows. The army was led by several generals. There was at the front line the demon troll Stonegrinder, who is the brother of Ironbiter. At the east and west ends of the army there was Thrallcleaver and Limb Terror. They were the torturers of the devil's dungeons. At last, leading the army was a terrible foe. From a tall tower hewn out of the mountainside there was Storm Queen, a demon witch, who was a scourge of the armies of the devil if they disobeyed her, and she was the wife of the devil himself, and was also called Lilith in the old times before the devil emerged. She was terrible to behold. We are terribly outnumbered, cried one of the old self-scorners. I'd rather whip my back for eternity as they laughed than to face this foe. Then he ran like a madman, and was not far before being struck by lightning. Over the battlefield there were clear skies, but on both sides there were terrible storms. The storm over the demon army was that of the conjuring of the devil and the Storm Queen. The other was with them, and they knew... The other was far greater, appearing much more terrible and beautiful. The presence of the Thornwearer was with them, and they knew this battle was of his will, so they prepared themselves. All was quiet, only the rumbling of the storms could be heard. Then Hellstormer sounded his horn, and the army charged forth. They were like a great wildfire sweeping across a long-forsaken land, dead for years. The demons chanted their evil tongue, but as the firefolk charged, there came with them a beam of light showing through the storm clouds, and it blinded them. The armies clashed. Hellstormer faced the Stonegrinder, and they battled for hours that felt like days to Hellstormer. The Storm Queen and the whole of the army, save the three generals, drew back into the mountain pass, for they had held long against the firefolk. But only a few remained that were not yet chained and taken by the withdrawn armies. But each of them cleaved hundreds of demons' heads before they were spent, and now it was down to the first, yet again the 7. Legions upon legions against only 7, and many generals that were the greatest foes they'd ever faced. While Hellstormer faced Stonegrinder 1-1, the other 6 split and faced the Thrall Cleaver and Limb Terror, but they were nearly spent, and so was Hellstormer. It was a brutal fight. It took a powerful blow to end Ironbiter, and Hellstormer knew not how he would strike such a blow against Ironbiter's older and more powerful brother. The fight ensued long. The other 6 were completely spent and taken as prisoners. Hellstormer tried to reach them, running from Stonecrusher to the others as the demon laughed from behind him. "You cannot win, you fool. Go back to your thraldom and build the devil's kingdom," he said. "I bet that doesn't sound so bad after this long fight." The 3 generals now surrounded him. "Surrender or we will tread you into the ground." Hellstormer could barely stand. He was terrified. He was fearful, and despair began to take him, though he still tried to look defiantly against them. "You'll have to crush me," he said. "I will be prisoner no longer, though you gave me all the treasures in the world. I will never bow before the dark throne ever again. You hear me, demons? Never again. You cannot break me. You cannot take me. I will stand right here till I am dead or you are defeated." He raised his sword with what little strength he could summon in his arms, pointing it at Stonegrinder. "Let me fight you 1-on-1, or are you a coward like your brother, of whom there's nothing left but blood and guts all over the ground where I smote him?" This enraged Stonegrinder. "What-oh, you want to face me 1-on-1 now?" I picture them sounding kind of like the trolls in Lord of the Rings, so that's why I kind of wrote it like that with that accent. That's literally what I put in the book is, "What-oh," like W-O and then O-H. "What-oh, you want to face me 1-on-1 now?" "Do you know why they call me Stonegrinder? It's because I am a force you can never endure." I lost my spot. "My brother was only part of me. You can never be rid of me. I will outlast any enemy. I am like time itself." "Can you outlast time, Hellstormer?" "Perhaps not, but I will fight nonetheless," he shouted as he charged forth valiantly. Stonecrusher sent him flying back with a swing of the blunt side of his axe. "That was a warning. I will embed the blade into your chest next time," he said with a taunting laugh. Hellstormer couldn't get up. Not with all his willpower and strength could he face this alone. Not even the flame of the firefolk could prevail alone. "I will not stop till I'm dead or my foe defeated," Hellstormer shouted. "No, though all the odds are beset against me, though all of hell itself stands in my way, I will not despair. Far too long have I wandered as a shadow in the dark. I will not go back." He now lay on a large circle stone with runes and symbols on it. This was not of demon make. It was of his folk. Stonecrusher raised his axe. I about said something bad. Bad word here. I'm a Christian, okay? I don't cuss. I try not to. Stonecrusher raised his axe and swung it down on him. He summoned enough strength to roll out of the way, and boom! Stonecrusher struck the ground, blowing a hole in the old ruin as he fell into a cavern below. His body hit the ground with a thud, but the demon's roars were still heard until suddenly silenced with a slashing sound. Then suddenly a horn sounded from below, and a great shout rang out saying, "From the darkest dungeon comes our greatest hope. The fire undying is rekindled, brother." All right, where are we at now? Oh yeah, we could keep going. Could probably read some of my books in one live stream, some of my shorter ones. Hellraiser. Chapter 11, Hellraiser. From the darkest dungeon comes our greatest hope. As in the days of old, when hell was opened and poured forth from the darkness, so also shall a great flame rekindle, and the one who is scourged shall become the scourge of hell. His name is Hellraiser. Taken from his family as a boy, Hellraiser was known to be defiant in heart against tyranny, and some of the demons said he was the last of the firefolk with still that stubborn will deep in him. For his many acts of defiance against his masters, he was imprisoned deep in the dungeons of hell, and many demon mothers used tales of this Hellraiser monster to make their children be more obedient. It was during a daily torture that he heard something he had never heard before. A faint echo of the past, a war horn blast. It was very quiet, but he was certain it was real. There was always a small fire in Hellraiser. He was, after all, a flame of the firefolk and proud of it. The demons knew it too and despised him for it, lashing him daily. But this day the small flame was turned to a raging fire, after hearing the horn sound, and such great strength wakened in him that he broke the chains of iron and unleashed a battle cry likened to the sound of the horn, and he said, "From the darkest dungeon will come your greatest hope, brother." Then he was seized before he could escape, and put into magic chains the demons had made from a metal they called demonil. Yet little did they know this metal was already discovered, and was the substance known as fire iron, used by the firefolk. They bound him in a dungeon even deeper than before, isolating him from the cries and sounds of his fellow prisoners. The second he was bound by the chains, he felt he could overpower them all, yet he did not, and allowed them to take him further down, for that's where he felt called by a force unexplainable. Deep now in the dungeons, he broke the chains, and from these bonds fashioned a weapon with them. Then he also saw his cage door was fashioned of the same steel. And with the fire now in his soul, he built a fire, melted the door down, and fashioned armor from it, likened to the armor of his kin in the past. He was so far down now that now the demons couldn't hear any of the sounds or the war preparations in Hellraiser's cell. Dang. The day I just started to live streaming reading again, I still got a cold. Now, clad in glowing white armor and wielding 2 glowing axes, he ran to the exit of the small dungeon. There was a choice. To the right and up, he saw lights and heard more demons. To the left and down, he saw nothing but darkness and heard nothing. From the deepest dungeon, hope shall come indeed. But am I to go deeper? Deeper than the demons themselves go? He wondered to himself. Yes, he then exclaimed, I will go even deeper still. I know not why, but something draws me there, so I shall go. Chapter 12. The Steward of the First Fire. He plunged deeper into the very heart of hell. His journey down was met with many paths and many crossroads at which he followed his senses, till it abruptly ended without anywhere to go. It was a massive black gate made of obsidian, it seemed. Was he to knock? It would be impolite not to do so, he thought. If it was the devil, he had a mindset of slaying him. If it was some other monster, he would slay it as well. He knocked. Boom, 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 it sounded. The ground began to shake. The door began to open. When it opened, there was no one there. He stepped inside and looked across a great hall to see a large fire fueled by the earth itself. Then he heard a voice speak. It laughs and then says, So the demons are still too afraid of their own realm. Ha! He laughed again. Did you know that is because it was never their realm at all? It was once as you see in this great hall all throughout the under-earth. Many great halls there were now turned to stinking pits by these uncreatures of Umbreoth. Yes, it is true there was a time when the demons were not here at all, but one day long ago they fell from the sky, the first of them, fallen servants of the Thorn-wearers, what I would guess. The created now uncreated, and become servants of the uncreator. But alas, one has come, and one of my folk at that. He laughed heartily. What is your name, Flaming One? He asked. I am Hellraiser, brother of Hellstormer, and I escaped my bonds in the deepest dungeon of hell, and when I escaped I felt something calling me down deeper. I followed my instincts, and it has led me to you. Who are you, may I ask? I am steward of the first fire. You can call me Aisha, that is my name, and I am the father of all the firefolk. A very great grandfather to you, my son. Though the flame has died in many, and even it faded in your brother for a time, you both are a light. No light of old can compare to yours. Great Father, you've seen my brother? Hellraiser asked. I've seen him in a vision. He has been rekindled, and he has sounded the great war horn of old upon the ancient surface ruins of our folk. The old war horn, that is what I heard, said Hellraiser. Yes, replied Aisha. All the surface workers heard it, I would say, but down below there are many except our kin who will have heard it. Hellstormer has already slayed a great foe as well, and he has begun to awaken hearts. You must do the same, for your brother will have need of aid. From the depths of this once beautiful world turned to a hellscape, you must raise an army, and it will be like hell to the evil that plagues us. Come now, said the steward. Come and reverse the doom that was set upon you to walk in the shadows, without life and without light. Take the fire undying, and wield it with a power that is already in you, for it is all you need. So Hellraiser ran forth, leaping across the chasm in the hall, where the steward stood, and the undying fire burned. Take this and return to the surface, said the steward. The hearts of our folk shall follow you as you wield this fire against our foes. Take it and rekindle hope. Let the horn above continue to sound, for there is hope, not only above, but also below, where naught would expect it to come. Taking a small flame the steward gave him, it floated in his hands and never left him. He need only to summon it, and it would come. It was sewn into his being, just like what burned in his heart, only much more now than it was before, much greater than any before or after him. Leaping across the chasm again, it was much easier, like stepping across a small crack in the ground. He was back at the entrance and to the exit to this great hall. Again, I say, go, Hellraiser, and emerge from the ground to be the world's greatest hope. Let the kingdom below be also taken back, and be as of times old, full of hope and growth. Perhaps then I shall see you again. We can keep reading. I'm thinking. Next, after the end of the next chapter would be kind of a good stopping point. I mean, end of the chapter is a good stopping point. But I kind of want to get to chapter 14. So I can leave off there and do that next time. Chapter 13, Lightless. He then left, stepping out of the large door as it shut behind him. It was unbearably quiet. So quiet it was deafening. It was also dark, and it seemed even in the darkness something darker could be seen. Lightless, it seemed. All of a sudden, a great terror came over Hellraiser, and part of him wanted to despair and run in fear. The very shadow seemed to be closing in around him. He then remembered the fire he wielded, and he said in the tongue of the firefolk, I have to try this again. I haven't done what Tolkien did, systematically make a language, but I've started that, sort of. But it's also mostly Hebrew, but I can't say that it's all Hebrew because I kind of made some stuff up and put things together differently. So, and I probably can't say it in Hebrew because I don't know Hebrew. I mean, I'm working on it, but all right, let's try this. Lehiot et haesh bana ashim vehele iser et hafad ha olami. That is, rekindle, fire people, and banish worldly fear. After saying this, he wielded the flame undying as a great sword that pushed back the darkness, and then the earth rumbled, and it was as if he could hear dwarves banging on their anvils in the great deep of the world. But this was no dwarf, it was a demon. It was the demon Lightless, a great shadow of terror that tormented the deep. An ancient evil that many firefolk sought to slay, but to no avail. He said the words again, "Drive out fear," and he charged forward, stabbing his sword into the darkness, but it always seemed just out of reach of the sword, moving all around it. Hellraiser followed the darkest path, for he knew it was where Lightless dwelt, and he ran long, but always drawing nearer and nearer to the demon Lightless. The demon could feel his presence and his shadow getting closer and closer. "You would not prevail," he said to Hellraiser. "Many of your folk have tried and died in the pursuit. You will too. Drive out worldly fear," Hellraiser said again and kept charging. Now he was in the same great underground hall as the demon Lightless, but he did not know it yet. Many other monsters were there, and they began attacking him. In the many caves and halls around, the echoes of this battle could be heard, and in very faint cries the enslaved firefolk could hear Hellraiser in their tongue, and they were filled with fire too. "Garesh Fahad," they started chanting. With fire awakening in their hearts. Dang it. With fire awakening in their hearts again, they took up arms. All they had were shovels and pickaxes, but they proved useful for taking down their former masters and taking their weapons. Hellraiser knew it not, but now a great army of the firefolk had amassed in the caves all around him, and were all fighting towards him. He stood alone in a great hall with the darkness all around and demons charging from every direction. But he lost not his hope, nor did he despair and fall into fear, for he chanted the words over and over, and they gave him power and directed his focus and thoughts. And there was a being that stepped forth into the light of Hellraiser's sword. He was so lightless he made the darkness look like the light of day. "I am growing annoyed by your chanting, and I will..." "Garesh Pachat," Hellraiser interrupted, and he kept chanting it over and over. The demon tried to talk over it. "I am going to enjoy tearing out your vocal cords from your throat." "Garesh Pachad," he was interrupted again, but not by Hellraiser, but the army of firefolk, who had slayed the last of the other demons for now. All of a sudden, they were all around and chanting. "Ah!" screamed the demon as he shriveled up into a 3-foot-tall goblin. "Please, have mercy, look at me. You have stricken my power without drawing one drop of blood from my flesh." "No," screamed Hellraiser. You will plague this world no longer with your darkness. Small you are, and though I sense you are a great magician, I will not have myself or these men under a spell of ungodly fear any longer." He cut the demon's head off and set the head on a spear. He then took some old tapestry and what looked like an ancient shrine and burned it with his fire, creating a beautiful tapestry with the symbol of the ancient firefolk on it, of which he tied to the spear and gave to one of the shield maidens named Fiercer. Brothers and sisters, this is a great victory. The world is changing, and the monsters we feared for so long are now revealed to be much smaller than we thought. Perhaps it is not that they are smaller, but now we see ourselves as much larger. This is happening on the surface as well, I have heard. First, I heard the horn of old sounded by my brother Hellstormer, and I was drawn to the deepest place in this realm, to the hall of the steward, where he gave me the fire undying, and sent me to raise an army to help my brother on the surface, and to return to take back these great halls as well. Gee, this is a longer chapter than I realized. I'm going to end after this, so got two more pages. Well, one more. It's not super long. Though we have prevailed now, we cannot take the entire under-earth yet. We must go to the surface and help cut the head off the snake, so the rest will scatter until they are purged from the land. So forward we go, brothers and sisters. He then led the army up, and they slew any onslaught of demons that came at them. It was then that they heard loud crashes above. Hellraiser ordered the army to halt. He shouted, "We are not far from the surface." They shouted in reply, "There is a great battle above that shakes the earth. We must hurry. I fear it is my brother, and they need our help." They all quickened their pace till they came to a great staircase, but at the top there was a large platform and a large space above it, but there was no hole to the surface. Still the cave stretched high, and there was a roof at the top with strange symbols on it. Climb, said Hellraiser. "Climb to the top." At the top they were, and saw no sign of a way to get to the surface. They also saw from there that the cave ended. Boom, boom, Boom! Thunder echoes from the surface. There must be a way, thought Hellraiser. Just then, there was a loud crash, and the ground opened up with a great demon troll plunging down towards them. Get out of the way! Hellraiser shouted. Boom! The great demon struck the platform, and all was quiet for a moment, till the demon stirred and released a terrifying shriek. Hellraiser charged and leapt upon the demon, wielding his sword and severing the demon's head, just as it tried to get back up. Then he looked and saw the rubble created a way out. He shouted, See now, brothers, look and see, now the triumph of faith over worldly reasoning. Fallacious and fearful reasoning no longer keeps faith under lock and key. Free it is, and free shall it ever be henceforth. He sounded his horn, and he said, From the darkest dungeon comes our greatest hope. The fire undying is rekindled. And in that moment, though there was now a way up, Hellraiser was so filled with fire that he leapt up and even beyond the surface and crashed down like a lightning bolt against the earth. My brother, he shouted as he saw Hellstormer laying on the ground wounded. No, no, Hellstormer shouted. Save my brothers in arms. They are being taken away. Hellraiser looked and saw two great demon trolls hauling them away in their arms. He chased them, trying to catch up to them, and as soon as he did, they were at Hell's gate, where it quickly shut after them before he could get in. That's the end of that chapter. I'm going to mark this. So, we will start with chapter 14 next time. I hope you enjoyed that. If you would like to get the physical book, you can now at firefromheavenshop.com. Check it out. There'll be a link in the description of this to go. Dang it, I can't talk. To go and check it out. This is a fun part about live streams. You just get what you get. I don't cut this stuff out. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the story and that the album, like the big album project I'm working on. As I said in my, I think I said it in the last video I did, last live stream, but the Hellstormer album is like the big album I'm working on, and I'm doing other stuff, aside from that, because I'm trying to get a lot of featured artists on the Hellstormer album. So it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be epic, and I'm working on another book that's kind of like the origin story of this book, kind of how the world got to be taken by demons and stuff, but it's pretty epic. So hope you enjoy it, and stay tuned for more. Stay